about the world that you see unfold.
Your teachers will have told you this is an opportunity for you to hear from the people who are, making decisions that will affect you for years to come. Well, for me, this is an opportunity for me to hear from the people who will be impacted by the decisions I'll be making for years to come. And so much of politics is short term, right? I mean, you think about what you need to do in terms of the next news cycle, or what you need to do in terms of the next election date, and how can you prove that you've made things forward. But some of the challenges we're facing are long term. Go beyond one mandate, or two mandates, or three mandates. Think of fighting climate change, or reconciliation with Indigenous people, or eradicating gender-balanced country, and removing sort of gender inequities, or fighting racism, including systemic racism inside all our institutions. Those are things that take a long while to do. But in order to do the things that are hard and take a long while to do, we need to make sure that all of you are thinking about what that's going to look like and challenging us to do that. And that's why young people getting involved in politics is so much more than just a few extra voices around the table. It actually brings that dynamism and those reflections about how to shape the future in really, really meaningful ways. And the challenges we're facing here in Canada that I listed are not unique to Canada, obviously. Challenges around fighting climate change and protecting our oceans. Challenges around growing the economy in a way that lifts everyone up. Challenges around reconciliation with Indigenous peoples is something that people around the world are struggling with. And of all the different countries that struggle with it, we have here a new friend in Gabriel Boric, newly elected president of Chile, who came out first as a student activist, as his involvements in politics. As of about 12 years old, you got involved in politics, and was focused on making a change in his country by mobilizing a new generation of political leaders, and has gotten elected in Chile with a mandate that all of you would recognize. Indigenous reconciliation, fighting climate change, making sure you're building an economy that leaves room for everyone to succeed. And that matters not just in Chile. Of course, it really matters in Chile, and it really matters in Canada that we have leaders like this. But it matters for the world. At a time where we're seeing democracies backslide everywhere around the world, a rise of populism and nationalism, a rise of authoritarianism and strongman politics, it really matters that we have strong young leaders like Gabriel stepping forward to say, no, this is the direction that we need to go in, not just as a country, not just as a continent, but as a world. And that's why it's an incredible pleasure for me to be able to introduce you, and through our friends in the media, so many Canadians, to this extraordinary young leader that I'm very excited about working with in the coming years, Gabriel Boric. Mr. President.
Very much, Justin. I'll do my best in my English. As you know, it's not my mother tongue, but I'll try to explain myself or make myself clear. If there's any doubt about what I'm saying, of my pronunciation, it's not that good. Please feel free to interrupt me and ask. So, in this room, it's happening something that we're not used to in politics, not only in Chile, but in my opinion, in the world. There is much more young people than old people. And it's not that the young people are better than the older, but we are the ones, I don't know if you know the band Silverchair, from the 2000s, they said, we are the youth, we are going to take your breath away. Because we young people are nowadays feeling and experiencing what the future is going to be like. And there are a lot of times when people in our countries are against any kind of change. And they say they don't want to contribute to climate change because they don't believe in it, or they don't think that gender equality is important because the things have always worked like that, with men over women. And indigenous people don't really matter because they were so long ago important, not anymore. But we are here to say that those things are important. And even more, we are here to say that it is possible to build a future, a more equal future, where nobody steps behind. And in my country, in Chile, do you know where my country is? Chile, have you heard about Chile? What have you heard about Chile? Because we don't really know what you know about us. Can you tell me some things you know about Chile? Yeah. So we're partners in that. Yeah, well, that's true. The CIA didn't help a lot. Our history is a history of a country, a young country, 200 years, but a country that has fought for independence and to build its own future, and it has been really difficult for us and to most of South American countries because of the U.S. Not only because of the U.S., but one of the main reasons. And but I don't want to look into the past, because we have a lot of opportunities now in the future. You know, the world is changing so fast, and we have a lot of opportunities in order to fight climate change, to improve on gender equality, to respect human rights. And the message I want to transmit to you, to tell you, is that you have to value your democracy. You know why? You might think democracy, it's boring some days, that nothing really happens, that we have no big fights as in other countries, but as your friend said here, you don't know when you can lose it. And we lost it in Chile 50 years ago. It's a lot, but we still remember that. And now we are in a process of changes, in a constitutional process, to change our constitution and to change the way we treat each other in order to build a better future and to save our democracy. So what I want to tell you is that you guys are important to building a better society. And I was in high school not so long ago. I'm 36 now. I'm the youngest president in the history of my country, and I'm aware that we can make a difference. And the organization of young people and learning from the guys that came before, it's really, really important. And your voice makes a difference. It did in Chile. It did also in Canada when Justin was first time elected Prime Minister. So please don't forget your importance in building the society that we want. Because when you don't speak up, when you don't bring your interests or your preoccupations to the debates, others will. And most of the time, people that, no harm intended, but people, the older people, are more afraid of change. And we need to change to stay alive in the world, especially in the climate crisis that we are facing nowadays, and in the risks that democracies have now with the authoritarian leaderships, as we are seeing, for example, in Russia. So I'm really glad to be here. I'm really glad to have the opportunity to have a conversation here with you. Please excuse me if I cannot express in the best mood my ideas in English, but if I insist, if there's any question, please let me know so I can explain best. I'm with some of my people, my ministers that are also young people here. They can also participate in this really interesting conversation with you guys. Thank you very much.
We are now ready for the Q&A session. So if you have a question, you can raise your hand and we will come around with a mic. You can also stand up and ask your question. Tell us your name and the school you're from. We will start on the right. To the right.
Hi, my name is Frankie. I'm a 12th grade student at Corinne Wilson Secondary School. So Chile and Canada have both agreed to a target of net zero emissions by 2050. So we were just wondering, what have you done so far most significantly to reach this goal?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Actually, yesterday it was Sunday. Yesterday we passed a law in Chile that forced the government to. We have 24 ministers in Chile. So 17 of them are now working on the goal of being carbon neutrals in 2050. And we're going to check on that goal every 5 years in order to arrive there earlier. Because in my opinion, 2050 is kind of far away for what we need, what we really need. And also we are changing, or we are attempting to change the way we are developing. For example, we closed our coal mines, a lot of coal mines in Chile, and we are investing a lot in renewable energies, wind energy, solar energy, and green hydrogen. Also, that it will be really important not only for Chile but for the world. Chile has big opportunities because we have critical minerals, we have wind, we have sun, we have the sky, and we can help other countries in the world to advance into carbon. We have copper, also lithium, to advance into carbon neutrality. So we're working really hard on that. We are taking it seriously. Let me add just one more thing. There are some countries, like we are countries in the way to development. We're not as Canada, that it's already developed. We have a lot of poverty yet. We have a lot of inequality, and there are some countries like us, undeveloped countries, that argue that we should demand the developed countries to become carbon neutral before us. I say no. We have to be first on the line, because this will affect us, and we can make an example. One last thing, sorry, to extend. We are actually with your minister, with your PM, we're signing an agreement with the intention to protect oceans, because the way to fight climate change, it's not only reducing carbon neutrality but also taking care of the environment. And we think that from Chile and Canada we can help a lot protecting our Pacific Ocean.
Excellent. How about a round of applause for everything we're doing in Chile? In Canada, over the past 7 years, we actually did one thing right off the bat, which is, Canada had always had targets on emissions reduction, whether it was the Kyoto targets or the 2030 targets put forward by the last government. We just never had a plan to actually reach those targets in any real concrete way. So one of the first things we had to do in 2015 when we got elected was create a plan that was going to reach the reduction targets we had, which we did, create that plan, for 2030. But then we have to keep, as you all know, step up our ambition on being more and more ambitious. So when we got in 2015, we kept the regular targets that were there of 30% reduction by 2030. But we actually created a plan that was going to get us there. That was the first step, because we hadn't had that. Now, we've moved up to 32, then 36%, and now finally 42 to 45% target of reductions from 2030 levels. And that's not an easy thing, because first of all, Canada already has phased out its coal plants, or in the process of phasing out its coal plants. So those are going to be gone by 2030. We continue to produce oil and gas that Canadians and people around the world, particularly with Russia's invasion, still needs, at least for a number more years. And at the same time, we have to reduce the carbon emissions of that oil and gas and invest in those renewables so that we're no longer reliant on oil and gas by 2050. And that's a big pivot for Canada, because we are one of the top energy producing countries in the world. So it's harder for us to do, but just as Gabrielle pointed out that, developing nations, that are bold are stepping up to say, yes, it's hard for us to do, but we're going to do it. That's exactly what Canada said as well. And you will know there are huge debates over whether we're going far enough on fighting climate change in Canada, or whether we're doing way too much on fighting climate change. It depends what part of the country you're in. But what we've done, like Gabrielle pointed out, we have a new law that says every 5 years we've got to show where we are on the track to 2050, net zero. We also did something that not enough countries around the world has done, which is bring in a price on pollution. Meaning it is not free to pollute anymore anywhere in Canada. And we got a lot of opposition from that. Conservative politicians, including in a number of provinces, took us all the way to the Supreme Court to say we couldn't put a price on pollution in their provinces. And we ended up winning at the Supreme Court because it recognized that no, it matters too much to everyone, and pollution doesn't know provincial borders, it just crosses the country. So we actually won that, and we've moved forward with a price on pollution that is making sure that industry and businesses actually find it worthwhile to invest in technologies that are going to reduce their carbon emissions, because that's the way we need to go. The price signal isn't about punishment, it's about saying, if you just keep behaving the same way you are, it's going to get more and more expensive. But if you innovate and you invest in new technology that might be a little more expensive, but that will save you money in the long run as price goes up, then you're better off. And the other thing we do is we actually, because we're putting that price on industry, we're returning more money every year with that price on pollution to the average families than we take from them. There's lots of other things like investing massively in renewables and in science and technology and ways to reduce emissions, massive investments in innovation. We've hit some of the most ambitious targets on reducing methane emissions in a way that is leading the world, that we announced at Glasgow at COP26. But there's lots more to do, and that's why we need all of you to continue, not just to push me and push this government to do more quicker, but to push every single politician at every single order of government that they have to do more. Not just because it's the well-being of the planet and your future at stake, but also because that's how we're going to create the jobs and the economic growth and the opportunity of the future with these technologies, with these solutions that the world needs. So that's what we're focused on. Thank you for your question. And I think both Gabrielle and I are going to have to shorten our answers if we're going to get to enough questions.
Yeah, hello. This is a question for Mr. Prime Minister. So my question is, will you fulfill the promise you made in your 2015 and 2021 campaigns by replacing the first past the post electoral system with a new kind of proportional representation electoral system? Thank you.
No. I don't believe in proportional representation. I don't think it's a good idea. I did commit to replacing the first past the post system. I love the idea of a ranked ballot where you get to pick your first choice, pick the red guy first, and then the orange girl second, and the green person third, and then you never get the blue person, if that's the way you choose to vote. So you don't have to worry about who might get elected if you vote for your preferred choice. I think having people challenge themselves as a political party to be people's second or third choices actually brings people together. But I think anywhere we see it, proportional representation is a recipe for divisive and regional outcomes that don't make for stable approaches, like, quite frankly, we've been able to show in this Parliament, working hand in hand with the NDP to have stability. So I would still love to replace first past the post with a ranked ballot. I think it would be good for Canada, but it's not something a Prime Minister, even a Prime Minister with a majority, like I was in that first term, should be able to do alone. Because that's an irreversible change, right? If you elect a bad government, well, you have to suffer through it for 4 years, and then you get another chance to elect a different government. If you change the way voting happens, well, then maybe you don't get to reverse the changes that you bring in. So an irreversible change needs a level of consensus. And no matter how much I've tried, and I have tried, to bring people to the idea that maybe getting a ranked ballot would be a significant improvement over the existing first past the post, no other party has been willing to accept to make that change, and therefore I happily accept, well, not happily, grumpily accept that I'm not going to be able to achieve that commitment I made because it would be worse for the country to do something without consensus, and it would be worse for the country to do something that I deeply believe would be bad for the country, to move towards proportional representation. And I've always been clear on that for the past 10, 15 years of political activism, that I think proportional representation would be a mistake for Canada. But ranked ballot, I would do tomorrow. If the NDP asked me to do that, it would be there. But they don't want to do that. So, not doing it. Thank you.
Hi, I am Sunita D'Souza from De La Salle High School. En febrero de 2022, había 40 compañías mineras canadienses en operación en Chile. Estas compañías son responsables por la contaminación del agua, la destrucción de los territorios ancestrales y la explotación de los obreros. En el tiempo del presidente Allende, estas compañías no tenían tanto derecho de explotación. Pero, durante la dictadura de Pinochet, ellas se hicieron conceder más libertad. Señores, ¿cómo ven el futuro minero canadiense en Chile a causa de su pasado tumultuoso?
I can say we talked about that significantly during our bilats, and I'll let you answer first, but then I'll have a few things to say about critical minerals and mining as well.
Yeah. Well, she asked me about what are we going to do with mining companies that were used to destroy our territory and were used to, like, got a lot of revenues and they didn't give enough to the country where they worked. And some of those companies were Canadian. But what I want to say is that we believe that the way that we can change our development goals is convincing and forcing the private sector to work better. We have to higher our standards, our environmental standards, and we are, I told actually Mr. Trudeau that we want to demand Canadian companies to behave as is in Chile as if they were in Canada. Because there's no reason that can justify that in some countries you behave in some way you wouldn't do in your own country. Another thing important that you brought up is the revenues. we will try to pass a tax reform, an important tax reform, because Chile, one of the biggest problems in Chile is inequality. In Chile, the 1% of the population, the richest 1%, owns the 27% of the GDP, of the wealthiness of the nation, in economic terms. And so richness is really concentrated. And one of the ways that we can redistribute it better is with taxes on mining, especially mining, because Chile is a mining country. We actually have the 30% of the copper of the world. And the world needs copper in order to advance to electromobility, for example. So we are planning to pass a tax reform in order to get more revenues and to hide the standards, not only environmental standards, but also the relationships that companies have to have with communities, indigenous communities and local communities. And also, I think that it's really, really important for us in Chile, water. We lack of water. We need more water. We have a big drought. That's how you say it? A big drought. Sequía. And we need companies that use a lot of water, like mining companies or the agricultural companies, to use in a better way water. So we are working on, for example, desalinization process in order to get a more environmental standard.
Excellent. No, we talked about this, and it is extremely important that like-minded countries work together. And it has been a long challenge and a long-standing objective of Canadian governments and Canadian mining industry to make sure that they follow the same kinds of values and principles that they do as Canadians in Canada overseas as well. And the vast majority of Canadian mining companies are responsible. There are some that are not, and we have to be tougher against them. But when we talk about mining, it's easy for a room filled with young people and thinking about the knowledge economy and the ways of the future to say, oh, mining, that was part of the past. You know, we need to talk about technologies of the future like AI and you know, the knowledge economy and innovations and technology. Well, that all relies on a handful of critical minerals and rare earth elements to make our phones, our electric cars, our wind turbines, our environmentally responsible future happens. We need critical minerals. And Canada is, like Chile, a tremendous source for critical minerals. But we cannot simply go at mining the way we have in the past or the way some other countries are. Right now, we get most of our lithium, the world's supply of lithium, the world's supply of a lot of critical minerals from countries that don't necessarily share our values. Think about China, think about Russia. And yes, it will be a little more expensive to mine and process lithium in Canada than it would be, or than it is, to mine and process it in China, for example, because we have environmental standards and labor standards and needing to work with indigenous peoples. But the world, particularly now that people are looking at our reliance on certain countries that are less reliable in terms of partners for these minerals, the world will be willing to support and invest in countries like Chile and Canada that say, no, we're going to do things properly and support local peoples and protect the environment and deliver you your shiny new technological gadgets. Because that's the way the world is moving. And one of the things that we're doing, one of the things that Gabrielle and I have talked a lot about, is the need to include indigenous peoples as full partners. And that's one of the changes we've made in Canada over the past 7 years that we've been working on reconciliation. You will have noticed that the previous government was able to approve all sorts of things quickly by not consulting or building partnerships with indigenous peoples. So all these companies were, great, I got an approval, I can go do it. And then what would happen? They get bogged down in the courts, Because indigenous people would rightly put up their hands and say, you didn't consult us, you didn't partner with us, you didn't do the right kinds of things to make this happen properly, and the courts would stop those projects. So what we've done as a government is instead bring in the indigenous people at the beginning and build trust and say, okay, if we were to put a mine here in your territory or in your traditional lands, how is it that you want to be part of it, part owners? How is it you want to create good jobs through it? How is it that you want to benefit the community? How do you want to protect your land from the mining that goes on as well in terms of environmental? And by building those partnerships up front, we can actually rebuild the trust and stand squarely and cleanly in saying that this is the kind of solutions we need as a responsible world. And that's exactly the kinds of partnerships that we're going to work on with Chile as we move forward. Because the reality is, countries like Canada, Chile, and even Canada, we don't have the ability to invest alone in some of these big projects. We need global investors to come in. But we need to draw them in with the right framework and the right opportunities. And that's the pitch we make, and that's how we grow our economies in responsible ways. And that's something that we've evolved a lot in over the past decades. But I thank you very much for that beautiful question and your excellent Spanish, which I was actually able to follow, which I'm always pleased with myself when I can. But thank you.
Hi, my name's Anne Flockton. I am a representative for Scouts Canada. This is a question for President Boric. Given the success of aquaculture in Chile, is there anything that could be adapted to the Canadian fisheries?
That's a really hard question because I don't know the details of the agricultural industry in Canada. What can I say about it? We are having big trouble in not only in Chile. I think it's all over the world. In I don't know how you say it in fertilizer.
Net?
No, fertilizing.
Fertilizers.
You asked me about agriculture,
No,
right?
aquaculture, fish farming.
Fish farming. Sorry, I heard aqua. Okay, yeah. There's a lot to learn. Don't do it. No, don't want to go that way. But agriculture, we have had a lot of trouble with agriculture. You mean salmon, right?
Yes.
Fish, yeah.
Open net versus
open net in sea.
In seawater.
Well, we're working now to regulate and to higher standards for agriculture because we have had some disasters, some environmental disasters in Chile. First of all, what we can recommend is to regulate, to have a good regulation with communities in order to give a lot of space in between the concessions. Because if there's a problem in one concession, they can spread. It can be spread in the rest of them. And we are working to protect more marine areas, and we are trying to convince or first convince the industry not to establish in protected areas like natural parks and stuff like that. It has been difficult. And another important thing is that the state, the government, has to have independent way of fiscalization. Fiscalization, is that okay? Because you cannot depend on the industry to see what's going on the process. You cannot depend on the industry to tell you if they are like fulfilling all the goals that the law impose. So have a good fiscalization system.
Oversight
System, a good oversight system, and it's an industry that you don't want to let it expand it a lot. You have to be really take a look at it.
We do have some open net fish farms in Canada. One of the challenges we face is a lot of them are run by Indigenous communities. So we get an intersection between environmental concerns and respect for Indigenous livelihood and Indigenous economic success. So it's not an easy question that my friend Premier John Horgan in BC and I have been struggling with on a way to actually move forward that is going to support communities but also protect the environment while providing the protein that so many of us need. But yeah.
Hello, I am Zan Frederick from Nepean High School. Mr. Trudeau, as you mentioned, I think in the first question, Canada's current climate target is to cut greenhouse gas emissions by 40 to 45% by 2030 from the 2005 levels, and to reach net zero emissions by 2050. However, according to Climate Action Tracker, a 40 to 45% cut isn't enough. And not only this, but we're not even on track to reach our targets. Climate Action Tracker says our climate finance and policies, as well as action, are, quote, highly insufficient. In fact, projections state that our CO2 emissions will actually slightly increase from what they currently are by 2030. When will this thin veneer of climate action give way to tangible positive change?
You know, one of the great things about being Prime Minister is I get to surround myself with brilliant, amazing people who step up to do the big things. Now, I gave an answer on climate earlier, but I'm going to call on my friend Stephen Guilbeault, who has answered this question. So come on up, Stephen. And he started as a climate activist, and getting him convinced to step into government was not an easy thing. But he only did it because he felt like we were actually the best shot Canada had of actually leading on climate change and making it happen. And now he's the one in charge of making it happen, and we are making it happen. Go ahead, Stephen.
Thank you, and thank you for your question. In fact, I was meeting with someone from Climate Action Tracker 2 weeks ago in Berlin at the G7 Environment and Climate Change Minister. And, you know, as the Prime Minister said earlier, it is tough in a country, it is tough everywhere to reduce emissions, and if you look around the world, there are some countries that are on the right path, but only a handful of them. And fortunately for them, unfortunately for us, what we're seeing in these countries is that there's been consistent action to fight climate change over the years. That wasn't the case here. When the Prime Minister and his team came in 2015, for 10 years, nothing happened on climate change. We started changing that with price on pollution, methane emission reduction. We're on track to reducing methane emissions in Canada in the oil and gas sector by 50% by 2025, and we're heading to 75% reduction by 2030. No other countries in the world have had such an ambitious target. No one, and especially not a large oil and gas producer. I respectfully disagree with the conclusion of Climate Action Tracker by saying that our emissions will increase. In 2019, our emissions decreased in Canada, and they decreased in 2020. Now, obviously, in 2020, we know that there was a big pandemic, so part of it has to do with the pandemic. And the emission reduction plan that the Prime Minister and I presented at the end of March, for the first time in Canada's histories, maps out how we get in each and every sector of our economy to our 2030 targets. And environmental groups, I mean, as an environment minister, you rarely get to please everyone from Greenpeace to oil and gas companies in the same day. But that's exactly what we did that day. Everyone said, some, like environmentalists said, we want more, but everyone recognized how detailed, how strong, and how clear our plan was. And some of them said, for the first time, we have a real plan to get there. So we're on track, but there's lots more work that we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Bonjour, je me nomme Nora DeWolf de l'école secondaire publique de La Salle et je vous demande comment travaillez-vous avec vos peuples aborigènes respectifs pour combattre le changement climatique? Merci.
Great question on how we work with Indigenous peoples to fight climate change. You got pretty good French. It's impressive. He was practicing it on me earlier. I think understanding, one of the tragedies of the past century in Canada is we spent a lot of time not just discounting, but actively trying to eradicate Indigenous knowledge, culture, teachings, language, because we thought we had all the answers as settlers. And it was horribly wrong-headed and has led to trauma and intergenerational trauma and socioeconomic outcomes and challenges faced by Indigenous peoples to this day. Our past has very much articulated a very difficult future. But the irony in there, amongst all the tragedy, is that the kind of thinking around stewardship of the earth, around respect over future generations, around the idea that you don't inherit the earth from your parents, you borrow it from your children, is the kind of thinking that we need now in everything we do, in the way we work, not just as a government, but as a society. And Indigenous people have always seen that and always understood that. So we find ourselves in a position now of trying to draw on Indigenous knowledge and understanding and respect for this land that sustains us all in a way that informs our path forward. And that's where those partnerships and that understanding and that side-by-side renewed relationship with Indigenous peoples is such an important part of our path forward, not just to make right on the terrible wrongs of the past that Canada perpetrated and perpetuated, but to actually move forward into the kind of world that you deserve for yourselves, your kids, and your grandkids.
Can I ask you a question? I don't know if I got it right, but you asked also by gender, right? Which was the gender view of fighting climate change? Right?
Not specifically, but you can elaborate on that if you like.
Sorry. Bring in that angle. That's a good
one. Indeed, I don't want to bring it up. I thought you asked because there is a lot of discussion about that in Chile, about intersectionality, about people that have been left behind. And one of the people that have been left behind, at least in Chile, are Indigenous women. And they are facing poverty and the consequences of climate change a lot more harder than men. And that's because in Chile, at least, I don't know how it's in Canada, but we were used to leave the women all the care of children, of people with illness, of older people, and they had to stay at home. So when there's no way to provide at home, women suffer more. And we are trying to achieve changes on that way of thinking by including more women and Indigenous women into the discussion. But also, I want to say that nothing it's going to change if we don't understand in our country, in Chile, that there are other ways of approaching reality than just the European way of thinking. And so I don't know how to say it in English, but cosmovision, the vision of the world that Indigenous people have, it's valuable. And we have to learn from that. And it's not a prehistoric vision. Because some people think that indigenous people should be left as like tourism. Like you gotta go and see how people lived hundreds of years ago, but they are also building their societies. They have a language, they have a way of thinking, they have a way of works, they have medicine. And if we as a society are able to include that in our reflections and in the way we face challenges as climate change, I think we can do better. We have a lot to learn from them.
My name is Faye McBride. I'm from Nepean High School. My question is a bit similar to one that was asked earlier, but I'd love to hear about some more specific action that's going to be taken, even though some great general ideas were discussed. So in an effort to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, there's been a rise in the popularity of electric vehicles and renewable energy in Canada. However, behind this green growth imagery, there has been Canadian mining companies viewing this increased demand for copper, lithium, and other metals solely as an opportunity for profit. These companies are placing mines all around the world, including in Chile. In doing so, they're taking advantage of lenient regulations surrounding the environment, workers, Indigenous peoples, and human rights. How do you, Mr. Justin Trudeau, plan to hold Canadian companies accountable while working with Indigenous communities globally to ensure they are in control of their own lands and are not harmed by the negative impacts of mining?
Well, I can tell you it makes it a lot easier for us to have that impact when we have a partner like Gabriel Boric. When the Chilean government says, no, yes, we want to see Chile grow and contribute to the global economy and the need for minerals of the future to drive our cars and to drive our economies, but it has to be done the right way. It makes it a lot easier for me and for Canada to ensure that those standards are being met. The challenge is that there are countries around the world that don't take that view, that don't care about Indigenous rights, that don't care about labor standards, or that don't care about environmental concerns, or are so overwhelmed with pressing survival problems that they don't have the space to care for that. And no matter how much Canada would want to tell them that they have to, we don't get to dictate what happens in other countries. And that's where working with progressive leaders and countries that are focused on creating a new paradigm, understanding that we can't, as a civilization, as a society, turn our backs on what's happening on the other side of the world just because we don't see it. Because now we do see it. And we do have responsibilities for it. And as we begin to understand the supply chains that involve child labor, or supply chains that involve unacceptable human rights abuses, or supply chains that involve impossible environmental degradation, are no longer acceptable, not just to Canadian consumers, but to more and more markets around the world, there becomes an impetus to make that change. And that's exactly what we're focused on.
Yeah. I would like to... it could be a contradiction, or we can have a contradiction in between, like, advancing into electromobility. But in order to advance to electromobility, you need copper or lithium. And the copper and lithium, in order to get it, you need mining companies. So the easiest answer would be, no, we will no longer permit mining companies in, for example, our country. But so which is the cost, the alternative cost of that decision? That oil and gas will keep on, will still be the main resources. So I think the answer, it's more difficult, but we have to work on that, and we have to say, yes, we need copper, we need lithium, but we need copper and lithium with no carbon impact. And we have to force companies to work on that, and we have to make the necessary reforms in order to have a higher standard. And it's not only a moral issue, it's also an economic issue. Because if we do it good, if we do it better, I think it's a survival thing. If we keep on destroying our environment, if we keep on destroying the communities that live along or beside mines, they will not last. So we can do it better. I think in Canada you have some good examples of that. In Chile we are advancing in that way. That's not only the private sector, also the state companies have to do better. And we are working hard on that with Codelco. But I think there's no contradiction in between needing or advancing into electromobility and having higher standards in mining companies, for example.
The next question will be our last question.
Hi, my name is Jacinta. I go to Colonel By Secondary School. My question is for President Boric. Usted partió su vida política como líder estudiantil. ¿Qué podría compartirnos desde su experiencia sobre cómo los jóvenes podemos tener liderazgos públicos en temas como el medio ambiente y el cambio climático?
Yeah, I didn't catch any of that. So.
She was asking how, what advice can I give all of you guys, as I was a former student leader, to change things in politics. What I would say is, as you've been doing it today, feel always not free but compelled to question authority. Question authority. Listen to punk music, please. We need rebel people. Don't respect that much as authority. Put in doubt what we are saying. As, for example, you said, I don't remember your name, but you questioned the goals that Canada had in front of the Prime Minister. That's the way. And if someone agrees with him, please go and talk to him afterwards and form a group, like a political group or an activist group, and keep on questioning. And don't only think that, but don't stay there. It's not only to question, but also to propose changes. Because it's easier to say nothing works, you're bullshit, you are a liar, you don't fulfill your promises or whatever. But, well, if he's not doing it, then you have to fight for it, as he did 15 years ago, or as I did a couple of years ago. The energy of young people, and please listen to the song I told you, what's the name, of Silverchair, it's called like the year 2000, it's in Neon Ballroom album, Silverchair, remember. The important thing is that youth can renew the way we think. And so please never stop questioning, so never stop asking, never stop proposing. Even that it doesn't matter if you make mistakes. We've made a lot of mistakes. And the older people had made a lot of big, huge mistakes. So we need you in public spaces. Don't embarrass. Don't embarrass to talk. We guys really need you, and we need you not alone. We need you organized. We need you advocating for rights. We need you protesting. We need you helping other people. So that's it. That's my best advice. And one last thing, in politics, it's never easy. You will, if you decide to come along this path, you will have a lot of headaches, and there's a lot of sacrifice, but it's worth it, because you're not working just for yourself, but the society, and that's really meaningful.
I think that's That's a wonderful way to end this, and I'll just add a couple of thoughts on that, because I get that question a lot from young people on how to become more active, how to change the world, how to shape the world around you, because that's what young people are all that's what you're all focused on. That's what you're here for. And the thing is that young people often get a bad rap for being apathetic or cynical, but it's never because you don't care about the world. It's because you care so much you're deeply frustrated that you're not being listened to, that you're not being empowered. And that's really important, that not just occasions like this, but that you do mobilize and make yourselves heard and get out and vote. In 2015, when I got elected, young people came out massively to remove Stephen Harper from office and bring in a progressive alternative. And I made promises, I got elected on a promise to do more on reconciliation than we'd ever done as a country, to do more on fighting climate change than we'd ever done as a country, to do more on fighting racism and bringing in gender equality than we'd ever done as a country. And over those first 4 years, that's exactly what we did. We did more on environment, more on reconciliation, more on gender and on fighting systemic racism than any government ever had in the past. But as you all know, there's always more to do. And all of you have to think about how, yes, you push for more. You push to do more. You say, damn it, you need to do more. You can't be complacent. You have to fight for more on climate change, more on equality, more on fighting Islamophobia, because today is the anniversary of the terrible killing of the Afzal family in London, Ontario, by someone who targeted them just because they were Muslim. And we have a world to change. And it's great that you are standing up to push for it, to ask me tough questions, to ask your parents and your school leaders and everyone around you tough questions. But at one point, you need to understand as well that you can be that solution. That if the world around you isn't bringing those solutions, you need to bring them in. You need to organize, as Gabriel says. You need to bump up against municipal politics. You need to get involved in provincial politics. You need to make your voice heard and step forward to volunteer for a federal politician you believe in. And you have to know as well that politics happens and the changes in politics happen through government. And my responsibility as Prime Minister is to serve all Canadians, not just the Canadians who voted for me. And that will always mean listening to people you don't agree with and figuring out how to compromise in ways that keep people safe and move things forward. And it's messy. And it's far easier to stand there with a sign and say, make the planet safe again. Much harder to figure out how to actually do it. And that's where we need you. Not just to say, do it, but here's how we do it. And we're with you as you make those tough decisions. Because, as you may remember, we got elected in 2015 to do all sorts of big things, and we did all sorts of big things. But turns out you can't fix reconciliation in 4 years. You can't protect the planet in just 4 years. You can't end systemic racism in 4 years. You can make significant advances. But 4 years later, when we went back to the polls, young people said, and it's totally fair, you didn't do enough. That's right. So we're buckling down and we're trying to do more. But that's the reflection we all have to have. How can we push as hard as we can on the system to do more? And how can we be part of making sure we get more done? And the key is all of you to get involved, get informed, and keep pushing, but be part of the solution. Not just telling other people, you better fix it, and we're going to shout until you fix it. No, no, no. You got to be part of fixing it. And today we're going to give the last word to my friend Gabriel as we end.
Yeah, no, I just want to add something to that question because I think it's really interesting. I think one of the ways of learning how to change the world is to study how people in history try to do it. And not only by reading history, but also by art. Read poetry. I really mean it. Read poetry. Listen to music. Stay away from Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, because it's really addictive. I have Instagram. I use my Instagram and Twitter, and I used to spend a lot of time in WhatsApp and Twitter and all that stuff, and I got really anguished about it. But it's not worth it. It's much better when you read a poetry and you listen to a really good album of music. Not only Silverchair, I think, I don't know, Bad Religion, or I recommend Against the Grain, big album. But try to think how other people thought they could change the world in other epoch, and that can inspire you in order to do so now, because as it's obvious, but it's important to be said, the time is now. Thank you very much. Justin, thank you very much.